When a desperate father who hasn't heard his daughter speak since his wife's tragic death meets a homeless former teacher with nothing left to lose, an unexpected connection forms. As Maya breaks through Ellie's silence, using methods the experts dismissed, she risks everything to save not just the child, but a broken family on the verge of being torn apart forever. Before we continue, consider my humble request to like and subscribe. It's completely free. Maya Wilson folded the hospital bill and tucked it back into her backpack with a sigh. $68,000. The red final notice stamp seemed to mock her from the envelope. 6 months after her mother's death, the debt remained, following her from the apartment she could no longer afford to the homeless shelter where she now spent her nights. The morning sun warmed the wooden slats of her favorite bench at Riverside Park. Maya called it her bench, though it belonged to the city like everything else in the park. She opened her dog-eared copy of The Secret Garden, borrowed from the library's free exchange shelf. After losing her special education teaching position to budget cuts, these quiet mornings in the park had become her refuge between job interviews that went nowhere. "You need to sit still, Eleanor." The sharp voice drew Maya's attention to a man in an expensive charcoal suit, looking completely out of place beside the playground. He held the hand of a small girl with copper-colored braids and eyes fixed firmly on the ground. The man checked his watch with his free hand, his movements precise and impatient. "The doctor said outdoor time would be good for you," he continued. 15 more minutes, then we need to go." The girl, Eleanor, didn't respond or look up. She stood frozen, shoulders hunched forward protectively. Maya recognized that posture immediately from her years teaching special needs children, the physical manifestation of withdrawal. The man awkwardly led his daughter to the swings. Eleanor perched on the seat without swinging, her small hands gripping the chains tightly. Her father checked his phone, frowning at something on the screen. In that moment of distraction, a scruffy orange cat darted from beneath the play structure and brushed against Eleanor's legs. The girl startled, nearly falling from the swing. Her father lunged to steady her, dropping his phone in the process. "It's okay," he said, clearly flustered. "It's just a cat." But Eleanor's eyes had widened in panic. Maya recognized the signs of an impending meltdown, the rapid breathing, the rigid posture. Without thinking, she closed her book and approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "Sometimes cats say hello by rubbing against your legs," she said gently, addressing the girl directly. "That's how they share their scent. It means they like you." Eleanor's breathing slowed slightly as her attention shifted to Maya. "Look," Maya continued, kneeling down to the cat's level. "He's leaving a little bit of himself with you, like a tiny gift." The orange cat, sensing a potential friend, sauntered over to Maya and butted its head against her outstretched hand. "See, he's saying hello to me now, too." A small sound escaped Eleanor, not quite a laugh, but a soft exhalation that almost resembled one. The man stared at his daughter with an expression of stunned recognition. "That's the first time she's reacted to anything in months," he said quietly. "I'm Nathan Parker. This is my daughter, Ellie." "Maya Wilson," she replied, still focusing on the cat. "What would you name him if he were yours, Ellie?" Ellie didn't answer, but she extended one tentative finger toward the cat, who obligingly rubbed its whiskers against it. "Ellie hasn't spoken since her mother died," Nathan explained, his voice low. "Almost 2 years now." Maya nodded, recognizing grief when she saw it. "Sometimes words don't feel big enough," she said, not to Nathan but to Ellie. The cat wandered off toward the sandbox, and Ellie watched it go with obvious disappointment. "You're good with her," Nathan observed. "Are you a teacher?" "I was," Maya said, the past tense still bitter on her tongue. "Special education." Nathan seemed to notice her worn jeans and faded sweater for the first time, taking in her appearance with new interest. Maya recognized that look: assessment, calculation. Would you be interested in working with Ellie? He asked suddenly. We've tried therapists, specialists, but… He gestured helplessly at his silent daughter. Maya hesitated. Her pride urged her to say no, to explain that she wasn't looking for charity, but the weight of the hospital bill in her backpack and the reality of another night at the shelter made her pragmatic. I'm not a therapist, she said cautiously. You connected with her in 2 minutes more than anyone has in months. Nathan pulled a business card from his wallet. We have a guest house. You could live there, work with Ellie after school and on weekends. The offer hung between them, too good to be true. Maya looked at Ellie, who was now watching the orange cat stalking a pigeon. Could we try a trial period? Maya suggested. 2 weeks. If it's not working for any of us, no hard feelings. Relief washed over Nathan's face. Yes, absolutely. When can you start? Maya thought about the shelter, about the locker where she kept her few remaining possessions. Tomorrow? Perfect. I'll text you the address. What's your number? The moment of shame was brief but acute as Maya admitted, I don't have a phone anymore. If Nathan was surprised, he hid it well. The address is on the back of my card. Come at 9 tomorrow morning. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will let you in. As they prepared to leave, Ellie looked back at Maya, her expression unreadable, but somehow less closed than before. It wasn't until they'd gone that Maya realized she was trembling. The enormity of what she'd just agreed to hit her all at once. She was going to live in a stranger's home, work with his traumatized child, and pretend she wasn't one step away from complete breakdown herself. The orange cat returned, rubbing against her ankles as if to reassure her. Was that a sign? She asked it softly. The cat blinked slowly, then sauntered away across the grass. Maya looked down at the business card in her hand. Nathan Parker, CEO, Parker Technologies. The address on the back was in Westwood Hills, where houses weren't just homes, but statements. From her bench, Maya could see across the river to the gleaming towers of downtown. Somewhere in that skyline was her mother's hospital, still sending bills to an address Maya no longer lived at. Somewhere else was the apartment she'd been evicted from, now occupied by someone who could afford the doubled rent. The next morning, Maya stood before the wrought iron gates of 47 Lakeview Terrace, with everything she owned in a backpack and duffel bag. She pressed the intercom button, half expecting to be told there had been a mistake. Instead, the gates swung open silently, revealing a curved driveway leading to a modern glass and stone house overlooking the city. Maya took a deep breath and stepped forward, the gates closing behind her with a soft, decisive click. The guest house was larger than any apartment Maya had ever lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a garden where late autumn flowers still bloomed in careful arrangements. The furniture was minimal but expensive, all clean lines and neutral tones. It felt like a hotel suite, impersonal but comfortable. Mr. Parker had it furnished yesterday, Mrs. Chen explained as she showed Maya around. The housekeeper was a small woman with shrewd eyes and efficient movements. Bathroom through there, kitchen fully stocked. Mr. Parker and Miss Ellie are in the main house. Breakfast at 7, but Miss Ellie doesn't eat much in the mornings. Maya set her duffel bag on the pristine sofa. Does Ellie have a routine I should know about? School from 8 to 3, speech therapy Tuesdays, Dr. Hamilton on Thursdays. Mrs. Chen hesitated. She doesn't talk to any of them, not since Mrs. Parker's accident. What happened? Maya asked gently. Mrs. Chen's expression closed slightly. Not my place to say. Mr. Parker will tell you if he wants you to know. She checked her watch. They'll be back at 3:30. Get settled in. After Mrs. Chen left, Maya unpacked her meager belongings, feeling like an imposter. Her clothes looked shabby, hanging in the spacious closet. The bathroom counter dwarfed her single toiletry bag. She tucked the hospital bill into a drawer, out of sight. At precisely 3:30, Maya heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. She smoothed her hair, checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror, and headed to the main house. Nathan met her in the kitchen, looking more casual than the day before, in slacks and a button-down shirt, with the sleeves rolled up. Ellie sat at the kitchen island, an untouched snack before her. "Maya, thank you for coming." His smile seemed practiced, professional. "Ellie, you remember Maya from the park?" Ellie glanced up briefly, then returned to tracing patterns on the counter with her finger. "We have a study schedule," Nathan explained, showing Maya a color-coded chart on the refrigerator. "She's behind in reading, so that's the priority." Maya nodded, studying the rigidly structured timetable. Every hour of Ellie's day was accounted for. Tutoring, therapy, educational activities. "What does she enjoy doing?" Maya asked. Nathan looked momentarily confused. "Enjoy?" "For fun," Maya clarified. "What makes her happy?" He hesitated. "She used to like drawing and swimming." Maya turned to Ellie. "Would you like to show me your drawing sometime?" Ellie didn't respond, but her finger paused its tracing. "Why don't you two get acquainted while I make some calls?" Nathan suggested. "I'll be in my office." After he left, Maya sat beside Ellie. "Your dad says you're having trouble with reading. I used to help kids with that at my school. But we always started with something fun first. Rules are we work hard, but we play too." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out her copy of The Secret Garden. "This was my favorite book when I was your age. It's about a girl who finds a special place that's just for her." Ellie's eyes flickered to the cover, then away. "Maybe tomorrow we could read a little together," Maya continued. "Just a few pages." When Ellie didn't respond, Maya didn't push. Instead, she pulled out a sketch pad and pencil she'd brought from her supplies. She began to draw the orange cat from the park, making its whiskers extra long and its tail especially fluffy. After a few minutes of silence, Ellie slid off her stool and left the room. Maya continued drawing, unsurprised. Building trust would take time. What did surprise her was when Ellie returned minutes later with a sketchbook of her own. She climbed back onto her stool and opened to a blank page. They drew in silence, side by side. Maya occasionally commented on her own drawing. "His whiskers are too long now, aren't they?" But didn't pressure Ellie to respond. When Nathan returned 30 minutes later, he stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with visible surprise. "She hasn't touched those art supplies in over a year," he said quietly to Maya, as Ellie continued drawing, absorbed in her work. "Sometimes it's easier to express yourself without words," Maya replied. "My students often communicated through art when speech was difficult." That evening, after Ellie had gone to bed, Nathan invited Maya to the kitchen to discuss her role. "Doctor, Hamilton thinks Ellie's silence is selective mutism triggered by trauma," he explained, pouring himself a glass of wine. He offered one to Maya, who declined. "She's physically capable of speech, but psychologically unwilling." "What about her mother?" Maya asked carefully. Mrs. Chen mentioned an accident. Nathan's expression tightened. "Car accident, 2 years ago. Kate was driving to Ellie's school performance because I was stuck in a meeting." He took a long sip of wine. "Ellie stopped talking a few weeks after the funeral." Maya nodded, understanding more now. "I'm sorry. The therapists all say she'll speak when she's ready, but it's been 2 years. Frustration edged his voice. "Her grandparents think I'm not doing enough. They blame me for Kate's death." "Do they see Ellie often?" "Once a month. It's tense. They've been pushing for more involvement." He set down his glass with a sharp click. "Enough about that. Your role would be to support her education and provide consistency. The salary is $60,000 annually, plus room and board. Health insurance after 90 days. The amount staggered Maya. It was nearly double her former teaching salary. "That's very generous," she managed. "I want the best for Ellie," Nathan said simply. "Can you start tomorrow?" Mrs. Chen will drive her to school, but you could pick her up, get to know her routine. Maya nodded, still processing the sudden change in her circumstances. Yesterday, she'd been calculating whether she had enough for a load of laundry at the laundromat. Today, she was being offered a salary that would clear her mother's medical debt in just over a year. One more thing, Nathan added, his tone shifting to something less certain. Why were you at the park yesterday, mid-morning on a weekday? The question was polite but direct. Maya considered deflecting but opted for honesty. I've been staying at the Riverside shelter for the past 2 months. The park is quiet during school hours. Nathan absorbed this without visible judgment. May I ask what happened? My mother got sick, cancer. I took a leave from teaching to care for her, burnt through my savings on medical bills. By the time she died, I was behind on rent. Then budget cuts eliminated my position. Maya kept her voice even, stating facts without emotion. Life happens. Something in Nathan's expression shifted, not pity, but a kind of recognition. Yes, he said quietly. It does. Later, in the guest house, Maya sat on the edge of the too-soft bed, surroundings too quiet after months of shelter noise. On the nightstand was a new iPhone with a note. For work, your number is programmed in my phone. NP. She thought about the girl who wouldn't speak, and the father trying to fix things with schedules and specialists, about how grief could silence a child and blind a parent to what might actually help. Tomorrow, Maya decided, they would start with drawing. Not because it was educational, but because it was the one thread Ellie still held from her life before. Sometimes healing began not with words, but with the simpler language of lines on paper. Outside her window, a security light illuminated the garden path. Maya noticed a flash of orange, the stray cat from the park, somehow here in this manicured landscape. It stretched languidly on the garden wall, a creature existing between worlds. Maya knew exactly how it felt. 3 weeks into her new role, Maya established a rhythm with Ellie. Mornings were for academics, reading and math at the kitchen table, science through hands-on experiments. Afternoons were for creative expression, drawing, sometimes music, occasionally baking with Mrs. Chen. Ellie still didn't speak, but her drawings grew more detailed. She'd created an entire series featuring the orange cat, which had apparently adopted the Parker garden as its territory. Maya noticed Ellie leaving small saucers of food on the patio each evening. She's named him Rusty, Nathan told Maya one evening as they watched through the window while Ellie sat on the garden bench, the cat purring beside her. She wrote it on one of her drawings. That's progress, Maya said. Writing is communication. Nathan nodded, though his expression remained tense. Her grandparents are visiting this weekend. I should warn you, they can be difficult. About Ellie's care? About everything. Nathan's jaw tightened. They blame me for Kate's death. They think Ellie would be better off with them. Maya watched Ellie gently stroking Rusty's fur. What do you think Ellie wants? Nathan seemed startled by the question. I don't know, he admitted. I've been so focused on fixing her that I haven't really asked what she needs. The candor surprised Maya. Maybe that's where we start. On Saturday, the Wheelers' silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway precisely at noon. Maya observed from the kitchen as Nathan greeted them stiffly at the door. Eleanor Wheeler was tall and elegant in a cashmere sweater that matched her silver hair. Richard Wheeler had Kate's copper coloring, now faded with age. Where's Eleanor? Mrs. Wheeler asked immediately, using Ellie's full name. In the garden, Nathan replied. She's been drawing. Still not speaking? Mr. Wheeler's tone was accusatory. She's making progress in other ways, Nathan said. Maya, our new learning specialist, has been working with her. Maya stepped forward, extending her hand. It's nice to meet you both. Mrs. Wheeler assessed Maya with cool detachment. What are your qualifications exactly? I taught special education for 8 years, specializing in communication disorders. And now you're, what? A live-in tutor, Mr. Wheeler asked. I prefer educational support specialist, Maya replied evenly. Mrs. Wheeler's gaze narrowed. Nathan, we should speak privately. After an uncomfortable lunch where Ellie pushed food around her plate and the adults maintained strained conversation, the Wheelers requested time alone with their granddaughter. Maya retreated to the guest house, but her phone buzzed less than an hour later. A text from Nathan. Could you come to the main house? Situation with Ellie. Maya found Ellie curled in a ball in her bedroom closet, tears streaming silently down her face. Mrs. Wheeler stood helplessly in the doorway, while Mr. Wheeler argued with Nathan in the hallway. Completely shut down after you showed her those photos, Nathan was saying, his voice tight with anger. She has a right to remember her mother, Mr. Wheeler retorted. You're trying to erase Kate from her life. Maya knelt at the closet entrance. Hey, Ellie, it's okay if you need some quiet time. I'll just sit here for a bit. She settled on the floor, not pushing, just present. After a few minutes, she began to softly hum a lullaby she'd often used with overwhelmed students. Mrs. Wheeler watched with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. What are you doing? Giving her space while letting her know she's not alone, Maya explained quietly. Eventually, Ellie's breathing steadied. She uncurled slightly, her tear-stained face emerging from the shadows. Maya offered her hand, palm up, not insisting. After a moment, Ellie placed her small hand in Maya's. Would you like to draw what you're feeling? Maya asked gently. Ellie nodded, the smallest movement. Later, after the Wheelers had departed, amid tense promises about their next visit, Nathan found Maya and Ellie in the art corner they'd established in the sunroom. Ellie was drawing furiously, dark colors swirling across the page. Thank you, Nathan said simply to Maya. They mean well, but they're grieving too, Maya finished. Grief makes people clumsy sometimes. Nathan sat beside his daughter, watching her draw. Is that Mom? He asked, pointing to a figure in Ellie's drawing. Ellie nodded, adding a bright yellow sun above the figure. She's in a happy place, Nathan ventured. Another nod. Nathan's voice cracked slightly. I think so too, Pumpkin. That night, Maya found a file folder on her doorstep. Inside were legal documents, custody evaluations, therapist reports, school assessments. A note from Nathan read, Thought you should know what we're dealing with. The Wheelers filed for partial custody last month. Maya read until midnight, piecing together Ellie's journey through grief. The therapists reported emotional withdrawal and selective mutism. Teachers noted academic regression. One psychologist suggested Ellie's silence might be a control response to feelings of powerlessness. What struck Maya most was how clinical it all sounded, how little of Ellie's actual experience came through the professional assessments. The next morning, Maya started a new approach. She and Ellie created a feelings journal, drawings, colors, and simple words that Ellie could use to express her emotions. Maya added photographs, Ellie with Rusty, Ellie in the garden, Ellie and Nathan baking cookies. This is your story, Maya told her. You get to tell it your way. Nathan observed these changes with cautious optimism. He began leaving work earlier, joining them for dinner instead of eating alone in his office. One evening, he even participated in their art session, creating a hilariously misshapen attempt at drawing Rusty that made Ellie's shoulders shake in silent laughter. Not exactly gallery-worthy, he admitted, smiling at his daughter's reaction. I don't know, Maya teased. It has a certain abstract quality. That night, Maya added a new entry to her own journal. Progress isn't linear, she wrote. Today Ellie laughed, not out loud, but with her whole body. N noticed and laughed too. First time I've seen him truly relax. Small victories. On the 6-week anniversary of Maya's arrival, Dr. Hamilton made a home visit to assess Ellie's progress. "I understand you've been using art therapy techniques," the psychologist said, reviewing Ellie's journals. Her tone suggested skepticism. "Not formally," Maya clarified. "I'm not a therapist. I'm just using drawing as communication." Dr. Hamilton made notes. "And the academic progress?" "Her reading has improved a grade level. Math is catching up." "But still no verbal communication?" "Not yet, but she's expressing more through writing and drawing." After observing Ellie for an hour, Dr. Hamilton requested a private word with Nathan. Maya took Ellie to the garden, trying not to worry about what was being said. When Nathan called them back in, his expression was unreadable. "Dr. Hamilton thinks we should try a different approach," he began, not meeting Maya's eyes. "She's concerned that Ellie is becoming too dependent on alternative communication and not being challenged to speak." Maya felt a cold knot form in her stomach. What kind of approach? "A specialized program, more structured, less," he gestured vaguely, "creative." Ellie, sensing the tension, pressed against Maya's side. Has Dr. Hamilton looked at Ellie's academic progress, her emotional regulation? She's connecting more, expressing more. "But she's still not speaking," Nathan countered. "The custody hearing is in 2 months, Maya. If she's still not speaking by then." The implication hung in the air between them. Maya glanced down at Ellie, who was watching them both intently, understanding more than they realized. "May I speak with you privately?" Maya asked Nathan. In the hallway, Maya kept her voice low but firm. "Pushing her won't help. Trust is what's helping, feeling safe enough to express herself in whatever way works for her." The Wheelers' lawyer will argue that 2 years of professional therapy has been less effective than 6 weeks with you, someone with no formal training in trauma. How do I explain that? "Maybe because I'm not trying to fix her," Maya said. "I'm just trying to hear her." Nathan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You don't understand the pressure." "I understand pressure," Maya interrupted, an edge entering her voice. "I understand what it's like to have your entire world collapse and feel like you have to be strong anyway. Ellie understands that too." Nathan stared at her, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. "This isn't just about Ellie for you, is it?" Maya hesitated, then admitted, "When my mother got sick, everyone had solutions. Doctors, insurance companies, social workers, all these professionals with plans and procedures. But no one just sat with us in the hard moments. That's what Ellie needs most, someone to sit with her in the hard places until she finds her way out." Something shifted in Nathan's expression. "I've been trying to fix everything." "Some things can't be fixed," Maya said gently. "They can only be carried until they get lighter." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "Let's continue your approach for now," he finally said. "But if the Wheelers push for a formal evaluation, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Maya finished. "For now, let's just focus on Ellie." Later that evening, Maya found a small drawing slipped under her door. It showed 3 figures in the garden, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman with dark hair, all holding hands with an orange cat nearby. In careful printing at the bottom, Ellie had written, "My family." Maya traced the figures with her finger, a complicated emotion rising in her chest. She was becoming attached to Ellie, to both of them, in ways that went beyond professional boundaries. The realization was both warming and worrying. After all, she reminded herself, this was still a job, and jobs, as she knew too well, could end without warning. The custody hearing notification arrived on a Tuesday morning, moved up by 6 weeks due to a cancellation. Nathan paced the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear as he argued with his lawyer. "That's not enough time to prepare. Ellie's just starting to make progress." Maya sat with Ellie at the breakfast table, trying to maintain normalcy while the crisis unfolded. When Nathan ended the call, His face was drawn with worry. "The hearing is next Friday," he told Maya quietly. "The Wheelers' lawyer is arguing for an independent psychological evaluation beforehand." Ellie pushed away her cereal bowl and reached for her feelings journal, flipping to a blank page. She drew dark storm clouds, then herself huddled beneath them. "It's okay to be worried," Maya assured her. "But remember our weather metaphor. Storms always pass eventually." Nathan watched their interaction with a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. "Will you come to the hearing? The lawyer thinks your observations could help our case." "Of course," Maya said. "Whatever helps Ellie." That afternoon, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Jennifer Reyes, her former colleague from Westbrook Elementary, texted asking to meet at a cafe near the school. Curious, Maya arranged for Mrs. Chen to stay with Ellie while she took a rare hour away. Jennifer looked the same: practical bob, sensible shoes, perpetually coffee-stained travel mug. She hugged Maya tightly. "You disappeared," she accused. "One day you were on leave, the next your phone was disconnected. I've been worried sick." "It's a long story," Maya said, embarrassed by how completely she'd dropped out of her former life. "I've got time," Jennifer replied, settling into her chair. Maya gave her the abbreviated version: her mother's death, the financial collapse, the shelter, and finally, the unexpected job with the Parkers. "So you're teaching again," Jennifer said, smiling. "That's wonderful. Actually, that's partly why I wanted to see you. We're starting a new education center for kids with communication disorders. Private funding, small class sizes, cutting-edge methods. We need a director." Maya blinked in surprise. "A director? Someone with vision and experience, someone like you." Jennifer slid a brochure across the table. "The salary's competitive, benefits, retirement plan, the works." The opportunity, the kind Maya would have leapt at a year ago, sat between them like an unexpected gift. "It's a permanent position," Jennifer continued. "Security, Maya, doing what you love." Maya's thoughts turned to Ellie's progress, the custody hearing, the fierce protectiveness she felt toward the silent child who communicated in drawings. "Can I think about it? Things are complicated right now." "Of course, but don't wait too long. We're interviewing next month, aiming to open in the fall." Jennifer hesitated. "I ran into Nathan Parker last week at a charity event. He mentioned you were working with his daughter." Maya tensed slightly. "Yes. He spoke very highly of you, said you'd accomplished more in weeks than specialists had in years." Jennifer studied her face. "There was something in the way he talked about you, Maya. Something more than professional respect." "It's not like that," Maya insisted, though a warm flush crept up her neck. Jennifer raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "The offer stands. Think about it. You deserve a career, not just a job." The conversation lingered in Maya's mind as she returned to the Parker house. A career versus a job, permanence versus temporary help, her own dreams versus her commitment to Ellie. She hadn't realized how much her own healing had become entwined with Ellie's progress, until faced with the prospect of leaving. That evening, Nathan called her into his study. Spread across his desk were psychiatric evaluations, school reports, and legal documents. "The Wheelers' lawyer is building a case that Ellie needs professional intervention, not an unqualified caretaker," he said, the frustration evident in his voice. "What does your lawyer say?" "That Ellie's progress with you is our strongest argument, but without measurable outcomes, specifically, her speaking, it's subjective evidence at best." Maya sank into the chair opposite his desk, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. "Have you considered what Ellie wants?" Nathan looked up sharply. "She's 7, and she doesn't speak." "But she communicates," Maya countered. "Have you asked her to draw what she wants, where she feels safest?" Nathan's expression softened slightly. "Number, I've been so focused on the legal battle, I haven't considered." "Let's ask her." Maya suggested. Tomorrow. The next morning, they sat with Ellie in the sunroom, explaining in simple terms about the upcoming court visit and the decision about where she would spend her time. We want to know what you think, Maya explained. Can you show us in your journal? Ellie considered this seriously, then began to draw. On one page, she drew the Parker house with Nathan, Maya, Mrs. Chen, and Rusty. On another, she drew her grandparents' house with just herself and them. No cat, no garden, no art supplies. The message was clear. She knows what she wants, Maya said softly. Nathan nodded, his throat working with emotion. I just want her to be happy, to feel safe enough to find her voice again. She will, Maya assured him. In her own time. 2 days before the hearing, Maya was working with Ellie on a science project when Nathan burst through the door, his face ashen. The Wheelers are claiming I'm romantically involved with you. And it's confusing, Ellie, he said without preamble. Their lawyer is arguing it's inappropriate to have you living here. Maya felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. That's ridiculous. We've been completely professional. They had someone take photos of us at the park last weekend. Us sitting on the bench while Ellie played. Apparently, we looked close. The memory surfaced, a rare moment of relaxation as they'd watched Ellie feeding ducks, laughing together about something trivial. Had their shoulders touched? Had she smiled too warmly? What do we do? Maya asked, suddenly conscious of Ellie watching them intently. My lawyer suggests you move out temporarily until after the hearing. Nathan couldn't meet her eyes. To avoid any appearance of impropriety. The suggestion felt like a physical blow. Leave? Now? Right before the hearing? Just for a week or two. We can say it was always a temporary arrangement. And what about Ellie? Maya gestured to the child, who had gone very still. What does this teach her about facing difficulties? Nathan rubbed his temples. I don't have a choice, Maya. Everything I do is being scrutinized. One wrong move and I could lose her. And what am I supposed to do? Go back to the shelter? The words came out sharper than intended. Of course not. I'll pay for a hotel. Continue your salary. This isn't about money, Maya interrupted. It's about doing what's right for Ellie. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Ellie slipped from her chair and left the room, her small shoulders hunched. I'm trying to protect my daughter, Nathan said finally. By hiding from false accusations instead of fighting them? What happened to trusting my approach? Maya felt anger building, not just at Nathan but at the entire situation. I thought you believed in what we were doing. I do, Nathan insisted. But the reality is, the court cares about credentials and regulations, not emotional progress. And I'm just a liability now. Maya stood, needing distance. I'll pack my things. That night, Maya moved into a hotel downtown. She sat on the edge of the generic bed, surrounded by her few possessions, feeling the bitter familiarity of displacement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. I'm sorry, this isn't what I want. She didn't reply. The next morning, another text arrived. Ellie won't eat breakfast, won't draw. Mrs. Chen can't get her to get dressed for school. Maya closed her eyes against the surge of worry. She had no legal relationship to Ellie, no right to insist on seeing her. She was an employee who'd become too attached, crossed boundaries that should have remained professional. A third text came around noon. Please come for dinner, for Ellie. Maya hesitated, then replied, I'll come at 6. When Mrs. Chen opened the door that evening, her relief was palpable. Thank goodness, she's been in her room all day. Maya followed her upstairs to find Ellie sitting on her bed, surrounded by crumpled drawings. When she saw Maya, she leapt up and wrapped her arms around Maya's waist, burying her face in her sweater. I missed you too, Maya whispered, stroking Ellie's copper hair. Ellie pulled back and thrust a drawing into Maya's hands. It showed a stick figure with dark hair standing outside the garden gate, with Ellie on the other side, reaching out through the bars. "I know," Maya said, "but it's just for a little while. Remember? Storms pass." Dinner was a quiet affair. Nathan looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. He kept glancing between Maya and Ellie, guilt evident in his expression. After Ellie went to bed, Nathan walked Maya to the door. "My lawyer says your testimony about Ellie's progress will be crucial," he said, "despite everything else." "I'll be there," Maya assured him. "For Ellie." "Maya, about us." "There is no us," she interrupted gently. "There's you and Ellie, and there's me doing my job. That's what the court needs to see, right?" Nathan nodded, though something in his eyes suggested he wanted to say more. As Maya turned to leave, he caught her hand. "I do believe in your approach. I believe in you. I just got scared." The warmth of his hand around hers felt dangerous, confirming exactly what the Wheelers suspected. Maya carefully withdrew her fingers. "I understand fear," she said, "but Ellie needs us to be brave for her." The night before the hearing, Maya couldn't sleep. She paced her hotel room, rehearsing what she would say to the judge. How could she explain Ellie's progress in ways that sounded objective and professional? How could she defend her methods without credentials to back them up? Around midnight, her phone lit up with a text from Nathan. "Ellie had a nightmare, asking for you in her own way. She's okay now, but I thought you should know." Maya stared at the message, feeling the pull of connection. She'd come to care deeply for Ellie in these 2 months, and for Nathan too, in ways she hadn't expected. But tomorrow she needed to present herself as a professional, not as someone emotionally invested. The line between caring for a child and loving a family was blurring dangerously, and Maya had learned the hard way that blurred lines often led to painful endings. The family court was smaller than Maya had imagined, more office than courtroom. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses, reviewed documents at a desk while the parties sat around a large conference table. No witness stand, no jury box, just people in business attire with folders and anxious expressions. Nathan sat beside his lawyer, spine rigid in his charcoal suit. Across the table, the Wheelers looked equally tense, Mrs. Wheeler clutching her husband's hand. Maya sat slightly apart, feeling out of place in her one good blazer, a purchase she'd made yesterday with Nathan's credit card after realizing her wardrobe lacked anything court-appropriate. Ellie waited outside with Mrs. Chen, drawing quietly in the hallway. The Wheelers' lawyer spoke first, presenting their case in measured tones. "Eleanor Parker has experienced significant emotional trauma, exacerbated by her father's work schedule and reliance on hired help rather than family support. Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler offer stability, consistency, and deep family ties." Maya listened as they portrayed Nathan as a workaholic who outsourced his daughter's care to a series of professionals, the latest being an unqualified teacher living inappropriately in his home. Each point stung with partial truth, twisted into something unrecognizable. When Nathan's lawyer presented their side, he emphasized Ellie's recent progress, introducing Maya as a specialized educational consultant with relevant experience in communication disorders. Maya testified carefully about Ellie's developmental gains, keeping her language professional and evidence-based, as Nathan's lawyer had coached. "And why do you believe your methods have been effective when years of traditional therapy weren't?" the judge asked directly. Maya took a deep breath. "Children communicate in many ways beyond speech. Ellie needed someone to receive her messages in whatever form she could send them. Once she felt truly heard, other progress followed naturally." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Hamilton submitted a report indicating initial skepticism about your methods, but noting, and I quote, unexpected progress in emotional regulation and academic performance. She recommends continuing your approach while maintaining traditional therapy." At that moment, a commotion arose outside. The door opened, and Mrs. Chen appeared, looking flustered. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. She insisted." She stepped aside, revealing Ellie clutching her journal to her chest. "Eleanor!" Mrs. Wheeler half rose from her seat, arms outstretched, but Ellie walked straight to the judge's desk, placing her journal on it with deliberate care. Then she turned and walked to Maya, standing close beside her chair. The judge looked surprised but adjusted quickly. "Well, Eleanor, is there something you'd like me to see?" Ellie nodded solemnly. Opening the journal, the judge flipped through pages of colorful drawings. Ellie and Maya reading together, Nathan joining their art sessions, the three of them in the garden with Rusty. The final page showed the same drawing Maya had received, the three figures holding hands with "My family" written beneath. The courtroom fell silent. "I see," the judge said softly, closing the journal. She looked at Ellie directly. "Would you like to say anything, Eleanor?" "You don't have to." For a long moment, Ellie just stood there, one hand resting on Maya's shoulder. Then, in a voice so small everyone had to lean forward to hear, she whispered, "I want to stay home." Nathan made a choked sound. Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. The Wheelers stared in disbelief. "She spoke," Mrs. Wheeler said, her voice catching. The judge smiled gently at Ellie. "Thank you for telling us what you want. That was very brave." After a short recess, the judge delivered her ruling. Nathan would retain full custody, with the Wheelers granted structured visitation rights. A family counselor would facilitate improved communication between all parties, with Maya's continued involvement in Ellie's education approved under professional supervision. Outside the courthouse, Ellie held tightly to both Nathan and Maya's hands. Mrs. Wheeler approached cautiously. "We just want what's best for her," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I know," Nathan replied, his voice gentler than Maya had ever heard him use with his in-laws. "She needs all of us." "Perhaps," Mr. Wheeler began hesitantly, "Eleanor could visit next weekend. We could set up an art corner, like the one you have." "I think she'd like that," Nathan said. After a moment's hesitation, he added, "Maybe Maya could help you get it started?" The olive branch hung in the air between them. Mrs. Wheeler nodded, not quite smiling, but no longer hostile. On the drive home, Ellie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by emotion. Nathan drove in silence for several miles before speaking. "You should take the job," he said quietly, eyes on the road. Maya turned to him in surprise. "How did you—" "Jennifer Reyes called me as a reference." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "I gave you a glowing recommendation." "I haven't decided yet." "It's a director position, Maya. Your own program. Everything you worked for before." He trailed off, not needing to complete the thought, before life collapsed around her. "What about Ellie?" "The center's 15 minutes from our house. You could continue working with her after school, on weekends, if you wanted to." He glanced at her briefly. "The guest house is yours for as long as you need it." Maya looked out the window at the city scrolling past, possibilities unfolding in her mind. "I'd need to set boundaries, professional ones." "Absolutely. And Ellie would need to understand that my role is changing. We'll explain it together." Maya thought about the drawing in Ellie's journal. My family. They had become something unexpected to each other, this wounded father and silent child, and displaced teacher. They'd somehow helped each other begin to heal. "I'll think about it," she said, though she already knew her answer would be yes. 3 months later, Maya unlocked the door to her new apartment, arms full of groceries. It was small but sunny, with windows overlooking the city park. Most importantly, it was hers, paid for with her director's salary, not charity. The education center was thriving, with 6 students already enrolled in the fall program. Maya spent her days developing curriculum and training staff, her evenings often with Ellie, who now spoke in short sentences, and had started back at regular school part-time. The custody arrangement had evolved into something surprisingly collaborative. Mrs. Wheeler had volunteered to help with the center's fundraising, channeling her energy into supporting children like Ellie rather than fighting for control. Maya had kept her promise about professional boundaries, moving out of the guest house despite Nathan's assurances she could stay. Some distances were necessary for clarity, for all of them. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Nathan and Ellie, with Rusty improbably perched in a carrier. "Special delivery," Nathan announced. "One slightly used cat who refuses to stay at our house now that you've moved." "He keeps sitting by the guest house door," Ellie explained, her voice still quiet but growing stronger each day. "He misses you." Maya laughed, taking the carrier. "Well, I've been thinking about getting a roommate." "We brought housewarming gifts too," Ellie said, presenting a wrapped package. Inside was a framed drawing, the three of them in the garden with Rusty, but this version included the Wheelers, Dr. Hamilton, and Mrs. Chen too. Below it, Ellie had written, "My whole family," in careful letters. "It's perfect," Maya said, blinking back tears. "We also brought dinner," Nathan added, holding up a bag from Maya's favorite restaurant. "If you're free." Their eyes met over Ellie's head, the careful distance they'd maintained these past months softening just slightly. "I'm free," Maya said, opening the door wider to welcome them in. As they set the table together, Maya thought about the strange journey that had brought them here. How sometimes life's hardest storms washed you up exactly where you needed to be, even if it was the last place you'd expected. Sometimes the smallest victories, a whispered word, a shared meal, a cat who chose you, were the ones that mattered most. And sometimes family wasn't what you were born into or what you planned, but what you built together, one small victory at a time. For now, that was enough. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of love to break down walls and bridge any divide. Please do comment your feedback and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of family, redemption, and the triumph of love over pride. Remember, it's never too late to change your story.